I was born in Korea, and my parents emigrated with me when I was 1.5 years old. And we moved to New York, and we lived there for about 8, 9 years. My brother was born there, and then we moved to Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. My dad was a doctor, and he got a job at a hospital in a town called Easton. And so we moved there, and my sister was born there, and I finished out high school in Easton, Pennsylvania. I remember, it was very notable to me when I would see an Asian face on screen when I was growing up. And it never really occurred to me how few there were until I saw one. When I saw George Takei on Star Trek, or when I saw Bruce Lee in the movie theaters, it was as if I didn't realize that there was a whole other world out there of people and color and ethnicity, because I had spent so much time trying to assimilate, trying to lose my Korean accent because I spoke Korean as my first language. So seeing those guys it was pretty remarkable in a lot of ways, and I have to say they weren't all good ways. As much as I respect and idolize Bruce Lee, he actually made my life difficult as well, because when I was growing up, I was saddled with this kind of notion that I must know kung fu or I must know martial arts because I'm Asian like Bruce Lee. And that's not a bad thing. That's kind of cool. I just bucked at the idea that people would have preconceived notions about me before they met me, And I think that's the tricky part of having these guys as role models. Right now, I look at George Takei, and I've been lucky enough to work with him, and I've told him to his face how much I admired him, and I watched every episode of Star Trek, the original series, and I remember everything that he did. That said, my biggest role model growing up was not an actor. I think the person I admired the most was Dan Inouye, the senator from Hawaii. When I was maybe 8 or 9, I remember my mom saying, "Do you know that there's someone, who looks like us, who's in government?" Now that is something where you can make a difference. And so I followed his career, since then. And I think he's one of the reasons I became interested in politics. And, one of the biggest thrills of my life was to be able to meet him and spend time with him before his passing. I think there has been an evolution in the way that Asian Americans are portrayed. I think there's an evolution in the way all minorities are being portrayed in this country, especially now on television. There are a lot of breakthroughs, I think. We face limits in different ways now, and these limits are signs of progress. So in a sense, they're good problems to have. I've been lucky enough to play roles that have broken beyond stereotypes, and it's been something that I've made a conscious effort to do in the choices I've made in my career. Now it's time for us to take leading roles. When we start having shows and films where it's not a question as to what the race of the leads are, then I'll know we've made significant progress. I think the other place we need to go is seeing Asian American males as romantic leads. I think John, had a breakthrough with Selfie this year, and it's unfortunate that it didn't continue because, that was a watershed, in my opinion. If you ask me, the worst type, quote unquote, to be as an Asian American male is a leading man, because you're never going to be asked to do the things that you're equipped to do. If you're a character actor, you can be the funny guy, you can be the best friend, but the one who leads a series, the one who is a leader, it's the barrier we have yet to break. And people always ask me, and it might be on your list of questions also, like, what kind of role would you like to play? For me, it will be a romantic lead, because that to me is when, that phrase, chicks want to do you and guys want to be you. If you can do both of those things, there's a level of acceptance in American society that I think will speak to better things about, race representation. Well, Lost changed my life. It was really the show and the project that put me on the map. I'd done a lot of work previous to that, but, I was a journeyman working actor. I was, I guess, recurring on 4 or 5 different shows at the same time on 3 different networks. But nobody knew my name. They just kind of recognized me from around. Lost changed all that. The audition process for me was very straightforward. You know, a lot of the actors have really great stories about how JJ saw them doing this and had to create a role for them. It wasn't like that for me. They wanted to create a foil for Sun, and so they were looking for a guy who could speak Korean. In this town, there aren't that many of us, you know. So I auditioned, and I was actually contracted to go do a movie in Romania at the time that the pilot was shooting. So it actually became a really difficult casting process because schedules had to be juggled around. And one of the many reasons I have to thank J.J. Abrams is because he actually switched around the entire shooting schedule of the pilot of Lost so that I could do both projects. I had a lot of pride for the fact that two Korean Americans were being portrayed on American national television, a primetime network, and we were able to speak Korean on TV. One thing that I never heard once in the conversation when people were talking about the quality of acting on Lost was how difficult it must be for an actor who didn't speak a language as their first language to perform in that language for 5 or 6 years. When we take white actors and we ask them to speak in another language, the entire conversation is about, you are incredible. You take a language that you don't know well. You not only learn it, but you are able to act scenes in that language. This is the pinnacle of your craft. You know, and you take a lot of performances by well-known actresses who can do accents very well, and that is an example of how good they are at their work. But not just with me, but with any Asian, it is almost assumed that you should be able to do that, or the work that you have to put in to do that is not significant. And it's a very subtle kind of racism that still exists today. I'm a big fan of everyone who's trying to find their own means of expressing themselves. What was great about YouTube and all the different media that have been created over the last 10 years is it's taken out the monolithic entertainment corporations that have been the gatekeepers to, you know, who gets presented to the country. You know, people like Ryan Higa and, you know, Wong Fu and all those guys, I admire what they do because they said, oh, look, there's an empty room. I'm going to go play in it and see what happens. And they deserve all the success that they have. And I think Asian Americans are uniquely qualified to kind of capitalize on this as a medium because, you know, studies show that, you know, Asian American households tend to be more tech savvy, you know, and so they're early adopters, and so it all kind of fits together. I'm really glad now that, you know, they figured out a way to monetize that because now it's not just an underground following. There's legitimate financial power coming from, you know, that creativity that's completely grassroots. In this career as an actor, regardless of your race, there's so many variables that are beyond your control. You can't control what you look like. You can't control what your physical build is to, you know, a certain degree. You can't control where you grew up. You can't control what roles are being cast at a particular moment. So don't worry about that stuff. But what you can control is your level of talent, your work ethic. And beyond race politics is the question of whether you're good at what you're choosing to do. I find people too preoccupied with the idea of fame. Fame should be a byproduct of being good at something. Fame should not be its own means to an end. And if you're going to be an actor, don't be an actor because you want to be famous. Be an actor because you want to be a damn good actor. You know, be good at the thing you choose to do. So if you call yourself an actor and you don't take a class, you don't read plays, you don't read books on screenwriting, then what is it that you really want to be doing? And there's no excuse for that, in my opinion. You know, be excellent at what you do. And that way, if you're good and the opportunity train rolls by, you'll be able to hop on. But if you're no good and you're not controlling the things that you can control, you shouldn't be blaming anyone else for that. Now, it's interesting because I do run across my fair share of younger actors who say these things like, I watched you when I was growing up, man. I watch everything you do. You're such a role model. You're an icon, or you're my idol. I'm like, That's great, and I'm really appreciative at the same time. Like, it sets up a dynamic between you and that person that you need to kind of work beyond to get to become friends. You know what I mean? But it makes me. I'd much rather have that dynamic than someone say, "Yeah, I know who you are." You know, and it's nice to know that the work that I'm doing is having an impact on others who are younger and are trying to do the same thing. I think that's one of the things that your organization does as well. You're trying to foster an environment where artists and executives of Asian descent can do something in the wake of what you've done already. So, and hopefully surpass what we've done. And that's really, I think, the goal. Like, to get us to a place beyond where we are now. To ask these questions is really important, but what are the answers, and what are you going to do with the answers to these questions that are the most important thing?
I'm doing my best to push myself as an actor and push myself as an Asian American actor to get myself out there and represent the community in a positive way.
Don't be afraid to fail, because failures add character and color, and it's those imperfections and flaws and mistakes that you make along the way that add to a great story.
We just wanted to bring good food to good people. If you love what you're doing, go do it, because if we can do it, like, so can you.
Asian Americans, I'd say, are known as trendsetters on YouTube because there's no barrier to entry.
You just need to find who you are inside and go forward with it and just show the world what you have.
In terms of Asian representation, it's an important issue, and the more there's a dialogue about it, I think the more progress that can happen.
To ask these questions is really important, but what are the answers, and what are you going to do with the answers to these questions that are the most important thing?
And I think that's the only way to change anything, is to just take it and change it yourself.